We're gonna start the meeting because it's 6:30, and Tom can have a conversation after the meeting.
Hey, I'm done. I just
I'm
got
joking. Working for his constituents. So I'll go ahead and call the September 8th, 2025 Housing Planning Development Committee meeting to order. Without objection, I'll call, or I guess I'll ask for I'll make a motion to approve the June 23rd, 2025 Housing Planning Development Committee meeting minutes. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Then, Assistant Director Boss, are you ready for the transit? You know what, let's, so I'll go ahead and give Assistant Director Boss a moment to gather his breath. The boys on the football team are 2-1, so we're proud of them. It's good work out there. And we'll go ahead into Ordinance 18/2025, which is kind of about front yard plantings. So I don't think we'll be in a position this evening. It's not my intention to pass this. It is merely to take more public comment, absorb a little bit more of kind of the intention behind what we're seeking to do in conjunction with the building department, and Commissioner Parmalee is here. So this was introduced in May, and we also got a correspondence from Keep Lakewood Beautiful today. They would like a little bit more time to review this, and certainly if there's anything formal we need to do as a committee to ask them to review it or just solicit their input would be helpful. So as introduced, the ordinance essentially called for a buffer area, but allowed for natural plantings in the front yard. There was some kind of areas that in our last committee meeting when we discussed this, we dug into, which are some of the buffers, how we wanted to, and the tension we had is, a lot of these types of plantings and managed landscapes are already occurring in our city, so how can we encourage that amongst our residents that are doing that and really faithful about it, but also give the building department tools to cite property owners that are not maintaining and managing their properties. So that, just like everything else we do on council, those are some of the policy kind of issues we have to dig into. So I sent out, and it's up on the screen here, some edits, and I can go through them, and I'm not controlling the computer, but Maureen, if you can, or Danielle, I don't know who's controlling that. As you dig down into the section, which I don't know what page it's on, it's in front of us, but the intention was to clean up some of the definitions. If you put track changes on, you could see the changes. The main thing that I changed as we go through them and welcome public input, and then even my colleagues can sit with it and we can schedule another meeting, was I moved back some of the buffers. So as proposed by the administration, it was a 4-foot setback from the right-of-way and a 4-foot setback from the property line. And then there was a 2-foot setback from driveways. So and this is all up for discussion. I do know that from a building code perspective, I think we need to be 18 inches off the property line and have a firewall. Is that correct, Commissioner Parmalee? Or for garages, right? You need to be 18 inches off the property line? But you can do it with I did it, and you guys approved it, so I thought, okay. Yes. Yes, and so so I kind of, when I was at least drafting these, and I know an average mower width's about 20 to 24 inches. So the intention here is that this code provision would affirmatively allow naturally managed landscapes. And if they're defined in the proposed ordinance, it's not just let your grass grow. It's some other function of having native grasses, other things that is a managed landscape. But then essentially the building department would have a little bit more ability within these buffer zones to cite for safety issues. Now, our code already has some or some ability for the planning or for the housing department to cite for these issues. One of which is Code Section 177501B, which I believe says that if pedestrian sightlines or motorist sightlines are obstructed and the plants are over 30 inches, 36 inches, then the building department can cite. And then secondarily, there's 177502, which says that if the plants are literally impeding the public right-of-way, so say hanging over and stopping people from being able to walk along the sidewalk, then the building department could cite.
Pardon me, Mr. Chair. Can we ask the administration to put the microphones on? Chris, I don't know if your mic is on to capture for the audience and the record. Thanks. Request for larger type. Thanks.
Yeah. And we, to be clear to the folks listening at home and in the audience, we don't intend to pass this evening. This is simply for discussion purposes. At least I don't intend as chair to refer this out of committee this evening. But we figured it was a good check-in point. So as you'll see within, the only things I really changed were narrowing the setbacks from 4 feet to 2 feet on the side property line, and then keeping 2 feet along the driveway as well, because that's essentially a lawnmower width. And then I cited back to the provisions that say the sidewalk cannot be obstructed by these plantings, and that if the plants are over 36 inches tall and obscure motorist sightlines or pedestrian sightlines for safety reasons, then they can be cited. So it's changed the intent a little bit of this ordinance to allowing naturally managed landscapes and then referring back to other parts of the code that are intended to keep people that walk and drive and everyone else safe in Lakewood. That's just the way I've proposed it for discussion at this committee and for the public to provide input on. Welcome my colleagues' thoughts on this, or the administration's. I sent it on Saturday.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm certainly in agreement with lessening these setbacks. I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm still a little concerned about folks who are already maintaining these gardens in the city and how that's going to affect them. But I'm very happy to hear discussion from folks, and also obviously want to hear from the building department as well. But thanks for having a conversation this evening about this, and I agree not in a hurry to rush this through. I think we have a lot more to hear, so thanks for that.
Councilman Bullock.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks for your work on this. Okay, just want to make sure that's working. So I appreciate the point that the proposed ordinance would create an affirmative ability to grow and maintain managed natural landscapes, which doesn't exist, I think, today. Is that an accurate statement from your perspective, law department or building department?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so this is a step forward in a constructive sense. There's some detail to continue working through to develop some consensus and also get workability around it. But I'd be happy, Mr. Chair, to make a motion to adopt as a substitute the version that that you've prepared tonight as a potential checkpoint in our deliberations. In other words, make this the new baseline. If you think a motion is what you're interested in tonight. But that's maybe towards the end of the discussion. I'd certainly welcome the chance for some of the members of the public and Keep Lakewood Beautiful to be able to share their thoughts.
Yeah, and does the building department or the law department, I didn't have a ton of time to review, so I apologize, but you had today. So curious as to your thoughts.
Yeah, I didn't have a whole lot of time. I tried carving some time out today, being Monday. But so with trimming that setback down, so we're taking the interior lots and the corner lots, giving them the same side yard setbacks. It's kind of the plan.
Yes, I mean, and the challenge is that, so the current code, and this is where, and if you look at a lot of, and this is the challenge, right? We have the lived environment. You have some people that are managing their properties really well, and their growth would be over 5 inches, even though it's a naturally managed landscape. And so I think at that point, rather than just bringing a ruler and saying you're over 5 inches, cut it down, that there's some determination about whether or not it's actually obstructing sight for motorists or pedestrians. And I understand that probably not exactly what your property management inspectors want to hear, but I do think we need to have some flexibility. But that's just what I was struggling with, so I welcome any more input to kind of help develop that.
Yeah, the only reason I came up with that 4 foot, 8 foot on the corner lots is just those main intersections, especially Franklin. That I think if we're, 2 foot, 2 foot, and then 4 foot on the corner, that's something we'd have to take a look at, because there's quite a few properties I could think of down Franklin that, I mean, you're in the middle of the crosswalk. When it gets to be a little later in the season and the stuff really starts taking off. But obviously open to discussion. I mean, that's why we're here, and there's no expectation of this thing getting passed anytime soon. And I actually see this rolling out probably first quarter of next year by the time we get it dialed in, because I'm not a fan of trying to enforce new ordinances, at the tail end of the season. We need to be able to get the communication out there, get emails out to people, get stuff on the website, so.
So your main concern is the corner lot setback?
It's the corner lots, and it's not just, Franklin, it's everywhere Lakewood. But then you can have the argument, well, we have giant commercial buildings that have zero setback that are all the way up to the sidewalk, and we can't move that, but plantings are a little less permanent in nature than structures, and I think moving forward, we can make a good plan that fits the city and the residents kind of as a whole. Just get rid of the guesswork is what I'm looking for. A little more consistency when it comes to enforcement, because it's already a tough job. So
I've had there's a lot of notices that went out for high bushes on corners. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if somebody got a correction notice and started traveling the city. That's usually what happens.
Councilperson Keppel?
Thanks. You could see me having questions. Okay, so I had a question about where we get, why, I saw it was 5 inches in height and now 6 inches, but is that based on something specific? I know that previously the code was 6 inches for grass. Is that where that comes from?
That's why it changed, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to keep it consistent with the rest of the code about tall grass, which is 6 inches.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And is that because if grass is more than 6 inches, it's looking messy? Or is it based on 6 inches is when we start to get into problems with sightlines?
No, it's got nothing to do with sightlines. That's just a high grass ordinance.
So, thank you. So the reason I'm asking that is, so if we're saying, we could have two different things potentially of, if we're talking about in section 4 there, so turf grass, lawn, not exceeding 6 inches, because we still don't want unkept turf grass.
Right.
But you could have 8-inch flowers that aren't preventing sightlines.
So that's the intention of the way I drafted it. So
Okay.
the intention is that the setback from the public right-of-way shall be comprised of either regular turf grass lawn that is not taller than 6 inches or low-grow vegetation, or and I should have capitalized these, managed natural landscape, meadow vegetation, or ornamental plants, which refers back to the definition of those things earlier in the code, or in the proposed ordinance. And then they have to be compliant with these two code sections, which are, one, that it be under 36 inches in height and not, above 36 inches of height and obstruct pedestrian or pedestrian sightlines, motorist or pedestrian sightlines, or overhang over the right-of-way. So I tried to give it more flexibility. That was my intention in drafting it, at least.
Thank you, that makes sense.
And one of the main reasons for that setback too, it's the handlebar catcher for bikes. So that's why when we have the fences on corner lots that are 42 inches in height, they need to be a foot off the sidewalk. So just keep it lower, closer to the sidewalk so people can get by. That's the intent.
Is there any public comment on, and we will, so to the folks in the audience or listening at home, email us as well. Obviously, we understand that you just saw this tonight. We don't intend to pass this evening, so we welcome any input that folks have, whether it's this evening or via email, and we will have another committee hearing about it, and you're all welcome to come. Is there any public comment? Yeah, if you'd like to make public comment, it looks like we have some people signed in. Just come up to the mic, say your name and address, and if you're comfortable, and then please provide your public comment. How you doing? Push the button.
Green. Okay. Hi, I'm Allison Welch, 1656 Orchard Grove. So I just want to clarify because it's a little bit wonky and maybe just because of the red and stuff. But okay, for the setback there, it looks like I heard you say that the 6 inches is for the turf grass or ground cover, right? But the 6 inches is not part of the managed natural landscape meadow, all that, correct?
Yes, so, and perhaps we can be clear, because I sometimes write like a lawyer, because I read like a lawyer, and maybe average people, can't understand it. But the intention is that within the setback area, which you define as 2 feet or 4 feet or 6 feet, there's, we need to work with the building department on that, the new level is 36 inches.
Okay.
And it obstructs something.
Okay.
Sight lines. So that's the intention, is that technically it could be over 36 inches as long as,
It's not obstructing something.
yeah, as long as pedestrians can see and people can navigate the area. That's the intention
Okay.
of what's drafted, at least.
So I think that's the part that I'm not reading well on there, but that's okay. That's good to know that that's the intention, because that sounds like what we were trying to figure out. So, thank you. Okay.
Thank you. And I have Agnes McCallick. Yeah, you can all come up together. It's pretty informal if you. There'll be another committee hearing too if you'd like to provide comments.
Agnes Michalak, 1459 Rockway. So I have a ton of questions. I am also not opposed to asking them from a KLB point of view at a later time as a discussion to kind of understand the background. My first question is regarding the tree lawn. So if we go to the figure, I'm missing that piece of the puzzle. I know that from my own perspective and some of my neighbors, we would like to know what the intention of this is with enforcing things on the tree lawn and those sight lines and that portion.
So I can answer that. The building department's jurisdiction starts at the edge of the sidewalk. So the entirety of this ordinance deals with the sidewalk back to your home. The area from the sidewalk to the street, including the tree lawn, is regulated differently by the Public Works Department, and this ordinance wouldn't really affect that.
Mr. Chair, to interject, though, I think that is pertinent. I'd love to hear what the law director's answer, Assistant Law Director Swallow's answer to that question might be. But also, if we come up with a system or a standard that works well for the private yard, there may be tie-ins or we could figure out how to extend the same principles, at least partly, to the tree lawn. And I do think residents are viewing the tree lawn as an important part of their potential plannable area, correctly or incorrectly. That's just the common sense impact, and I was talking to somebody literally yesterday about that. They're like, well, we don't have a tree here, and we're thinking of what we can do on the tree lawn. So I think that's a common sense thought by many Lakewood residents, whether it should be or not. And so probably one of the outcomes of all of this might be, once we settle upon some workable standard, we do some public education with people. Here's the, here's the rules of the road on this section, here's the rules of the road on that section. Sorry for the long-winded thought, but Assistant Director Swallow, what's the?
So the tree lawn area is considered part of the public right-of-way. We do have an ordinance that prohibits placing anything in the public right-of-way. It's not something that we regularly police, but if there is a complaint, excuse me, about, plantings or something in the public right-of-way, we may address that. We would go out and take a look at it and be like, okay, well, somebody planted flowers around the base of a tree and it's not obstructing any views, and, not take any action in a situation like that. But if it were something that were obstructing the public right-of-way, then we would notify the homeowner that they needed to remove that. And again, when I look at this and I think about this, and I also want to run the setbacks by public safety just to make sure that it's something that they're comfortable with, so that we do have an objective standard rather than having a subjective standard where, who decides what's obstructing the public right-of-way. But when I look at these figures, and we were very clear that we needed figures to help people guide them through what we're trying to do here, if you allow higher growth on the tree lawn, it's adding an additional obstruction. So if you have a kid on a big wheel that's flying down the sidewalk and a vehicle is trying to make a turn into one of those driveways, you want to make sure that that small child that's low to the ground is going to be visible and, not end up getting hit because the growth was too tall for the driver to see.
Do they have big wheels still?
My kids did. It actually almost happened to one of my kids, but it wasn't due to overgrowth. It was a distracted driver.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway for folks is that the tree lawn is not yours. You have the responsibility to maintain it. But if you spend a lot of money managing the landscape there, the gas company can come tomorrow and rip it up to put a gas line in, or the city could come and use it for, right-of-way work. So that's the message. But to answer your question, the intent of this ordinance is sidewalk back.
Understood. I do think there is a lot of confusion there for people because, as you just said, it's our responsibility to maintain it, but we don't get to decide. So I think that the way that some of this is written in reference to those tree lawns might not be as clear, and that I don't know that this would solve any of that, but just for future reference when reviewing any of that, it is not as clear as it could be of what you can and can't do in an average person speak, if you will. So thank you for that. I appreciate your explanation. And let's see here. I think you mentioned something about subjectivity. So my question is, who decides what is a managed native natural landscape? What components go into that? Because I can venture a guess that what I assume to be an 8-inch native flower, you might decide is not, and it's a weed. So I think that when we start to talk about native plantings, things like that, that there's a really big difference between opinions on what that is. And one of my problems with the language in here is the individual that solely gets to decide what that might be. And where some of these noxious weeds list comes from, I do know that the state of Ohio has a very extensive one, whereas this one is limited to, I think, 32, so having some more information on that aspect of things would be helpful.
Yeah, and I think that you're venturing into the area that we're trying to provide some guidance to the building department on, because our property maintenance inspectors are going out to, 300 or 400 of these, kind of complaints every summer, and they're trying their best to, serve the residents, but also make sure that they're enforcing the code. So I think that's what we're struggling with, to be honest with you, and why we're not trying to do this too quickly and take input and figure out a better way to do it, so that it's something that residents can live with and the property maintenance inspectors can do their jobs.
And I think part of our sustainability plan, right, is to identify that stuff. So I think that separate from Agnes standing here. Now Agnes with her board hat on for KLB would be more than happy to help identify some of those things and help navigate that from an education point of view, as for everybody, not just us here or public safety, just really the community in general.
Mr. Chair, can I respond to that as well? So the list that is in the code has been there for as long as I have been, which is a very, very long time. At one point, Keep Lakewood Beautiful did make some recommendations to cleaning that up and removing, like I believe it used to have milkweed in it years ago, and we removed that for obvious reasons. So we're definitely open to recommendations and, you know.
At least a dozen off the top of my head.
Okay.
We can absolutely do that. And in comparison to what is the standard for Ohio, Ohio State Extension has a lot of really great information as
Right.
well.
And if it's not something that's listed as prohibited, then it's going to be permitted.
Right.
So to kind of help better answer that.
Thank you, appreciate that. I think that is the majority of the big ticket items for me. Is there anything? No? You're good? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, real fast. Thank you. So Agnes and Keep Lakewood Beautiful, first of all, thanks for being here. Secondly, I think we should rely on your expertise both on the detailed listings of noxious weeds, for example, but also on how to work with the general public and get the word out there about the do's and the don'ts. My experience with the code is that it's been written over 100 years. Some sections have been on the books for many, many decades, and they don't necessarily get updated on a regular basis. Actually, Assistant Director Swallow has been quite good about periodically updating portions, but that doesn't mean we do everything constantly. So if you're noticing that the state law has more up-to-date industry standards, then we certainly welcome that feedback. That together we'll, we can consider that for an update. I do want to convey to the city a couple thoughts from having talked to some of the people in the audience and others in the public. Especially rain gardens, especially native plants that have an evolved root system, they take years to establish. So we'll have people who have invested a lot of money and years and care into growing under the existing rules. And if we change the standards, then all of a sudden we're literally going to take a haircut to their tree lawn, or not their tree lawn, their front yard garden investment. So to me, that's a factor that we should think of and respect. We grandfather in a lot of things in all kinds of places in the code. I'm not sure what the right solution is here, but there's people who've put a lot of effort and care into their front yard plantings that should, I think, be a factor in our thinking. Also, I think Agnes's point, Agnes, I'm calling you by your first name because I don't want to mispronounce your last name. Made a good point. We've got the city has a sustainability and a climate action plan. It calls for certain things when it comes to, carbon mitigation, and I know the red lines call that out too. So we sometimes have one foot on the accelerator, one foot on the brakes in our city policies. That's because we're doing a lot of things, right? And so there are reasons why we want to encourage people to do this for stormwater management, et cetera, right? So we've been encouraging people to make this investment. Now we're going to potentially tell them they have to restrict or confine or rip up what they've done. So that's something we're going to have to carefully balance too.
Well, I mean, just like anything else, right? So if you have a commercial building that was built in 1905 and we had no accessibility standards in 1905, existing is allowed to exist, right? Until it becomes a safety issue. So if that building built in 1906 has come to disrepair and they need to rip the common bathrooms out of the hallway, well, now you have to meet the intent of the new code. So, I mean, code enforcement's a lot of give and take, and I want the public to hear from me that, I am not an expert in thistle and milkweed. I mean, that's not where my profession came from. Majority of my staff, we are public safety, building safety, we're building people, we're code people, and this kind of started, a couple of years ago with the No Mow May thing and talking to the administration. We have to do something besides letting people grow their grass to, 8, 10, 12 inches for a month and then have to play catch up. So that's when the front yard planning started coming into play, front yard gardens. I mean, we have houses on our street that plant vegetables and stuff in the front yard. I mean, we don't have a lot of real estate. We're Lakewood, Ohio. So between Keep Lakewood Beautiful, public comment, what we talk about, I mean, it's, common sense isn't so common, especially in local government. We all know that. So whatever we come to is fine in my eyes, as long as we have just those adequate buffer zones. I mean, safety's paramount, we know that. I just want to be able to see when I'm pulling out on a main thoroughfare or the neighbor's backing out of their driveway. I just want to make sure that, if somebody's got their phone to their face jogging down the sidewalk, they're not going to see anything. But I want to make sure that we have clear line of sight on corner lots and liner lots, because when you have 8 million, 48 by 140 lots, we're really, really tight. And it's a combination, and people aren't really paying attention to what they're doing anymore. And if we can open up that line of sight, I have nothing against wild plantings or, growing corn in your front yard for that matter. It's just the simple fact that I'm a property rights guy. People should be able to do what they want on their own parcel of land within reason, right? I just want to make sure the general public's safe out there while they're out walking around, walking the dog, or taking the kids for a walk. So that's why we're here. That's why we're doing what we're doing. To me, it's less of what's planted in the yard and more of, because you're exactly right, like, I like manicured grass, but not everybody does. People need to be able to plant what they want to plant in their front yard, and I couldn't tell you the difference between water hemp and Russian thistle, but I can tell you where sprinkler systems are required in commercial buildings, because that's the world I live in. But if we can meet to some middle ground and focus on the line of sight, so we don't have things growing over the sidewalks, so people can see where they're backing out or pulling into their driveway, and we have a common sense approach when it comes to this ordinance, I mean, I'm all in.
Yeah, I think we'll get there. So I am interested in, I can work with the clerk to have this updated version. The figures aren't updated, sent to KLB so that they're aware of it and you all can provide comments. And like the commissioner said, and I think at least me as chair of this committee, we're on the same page that this is about something rolling out in next year, right? So we want to take the time now to get it right. Because there's going to be a public education component to it as well. I think about when we banned vaping in parks, it was just as much a code issue as it was letting people know that you can't do this in parks. So I think that's a really good process, and I appreciate, that's what's great about Lakewood is we all come together and try to figure out the solution that works for city hall staff and our residents in a way that we can have efficient government. That's what it should be. So on that, I'll guess we'll just leave this on the docket unless there's any more comments from folks. President Keppel.
I was just going to make a quick comment that when we do reach a solution, it might be a great opportunity for maybe Keep Lakewood Beautiful to work with a public information officer from the city and do some maybe educational videos about what to plant, why you would want to plant that, and how to plant it safely based on this new code. So it could be a good opportunity to educate people about the benefits of natural planting as well as how to do it safely and legally. So just a thought that we could work on.
Yeah, I think it's just as much about code as it is about kind of public information and education. Pardon? Yeah, you want to.
Okay. Mr. President or Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that we substitute or amend with a substitute, making use of the red line that you shared with the committee prior to the meeting. I think all of us have a copy.
Yeah, I'll second that. And I'll just note that even if we went with that, we would need to update the figures, so we still have work to do. So The motion, it's been seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the ordinance has been substituted, but it's still going to stay in committee. The next docket item is communication from Director Byington regarding a transit feasibility study. I'll let Assistant Director Boss, he has a presentation to provide for us. I remember as a kid, the community circulator in Lakewood, I saw the dates. It was interesting. It was 98 to 2009 or something like that. So right when I started high school. So I'll throw it over to Assistant Director Boss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can go through this and stop for questions or whenever we need to, if that works. But just a couple disclaimers up front. This has been over a year plus since we finished this transit study. This was conducted predominantly in late 23 through 2024. It really finished up in like May, June of 2024. So it has been some time since this study was completed. It was done by Iteris. So former Director Leininger and I worked with Iteris on this. So I'm going to do my best to cover some of the questions I may. If you have questions I can't answer, I will come back and answer them, or I can follow up with email. Because some of the stuff does get, as we get into the alternative comparison, some of it is pretty technical in terms of cost estimates and a lot of those, the different data points. But I'll try to highlight kind of the most germane things as we move through here. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So just in terms of background, everybody loves the circulator. It does come up in almost any venue that we reach out to or have any kind of form of public discussion. It's a great service. It only unfortunately lasted for just a little over 10 years. So RTA started their community circulators, and there were several of them. I think over time they kind of phased them in. At the 804 Lakewood, I do believe it did have the highest ridership of all of the community circulators, and it was the last one to get phased out. But ultimately, as the city then found out in 2010, based on demand, public input, the city administration at the time signed a contract and fronted a fair amount of money with to come up with a shopper shuttle. And so we kind of tried to pilot our own service that was kind of a hybrid between the city and RTA in terms of operations, and it lasted about a year until it just became too expensive based on low ridership. I think they averaged, and there's not a ton of data on this. I had to go back and dig up a lot of it through reporting at the time. I believe the numbers were somewhere around 12 riders a day, which is just not sustainable and you'll start to see as we get through this, just how much these systems cost to run. And ultimately that's kind of what put a stake in it for RTA. And that's what ultimately in April of 2011, the administration, the mayor decided that it was just not financially feasible to continue moving forward with our own system, a fixed route system, which is what it was designed to be. I think everybody's familiar with our current regional service that we have with RTA.
Mr. Chair, quick interjection.
Yes.
Dave, the hours for that year experiment with Lakewood Shopper Shuttle was, do you know if it was a full day, half day? I don't recall myself.
I don't know. I don't have a lot of data on it. I can look at I can get you that answer, as I'm sure it's in the contract. I know the intent was to try to mirror that Lakewood circulator, which was
my recollection too. Yeah,
it was like an 8 or a 12-hour service, kind of fixed route.
You could do anything, whereas there's some arguments that it could be a targeted evening or a special event or some other scenario. But
We'll get into a lot of
Yeah,
that in terms
okay,
of the different
thank you.
options that are out there. But yeah, it was trying to mirror that circulator service. So I'm going to go through basically 4 different parts. This is the first part of the background, and really the first part of the study tried to identify kind of the need and the benefits that are out there for having a local transit system. It started with a transit needs survey that went out to the public in April of 2024. 5 pretty straightforward questions. We got over 500 responses, which was pretty good for a survey here in Lakewood. And those are the 5 questions. So it was kind of really, how do you travel versus how would you like to travel? And a lot of open-ended questions and comments. And the survey or the report actually has all of the comments in the back of one of the appendices. You can read through everybody's comments that are there. So if you go to the next slide, please, I'll just review hit the highlights of the different questions. So if you go to the next slide, please. So I know these might be a little hard to read in the back, but these are the first 3 questions. Working top left to bottom right. First question asked, how do you travel for trips within Lakewood? Select all that apply. So this allowed people multiple responses. So obviously the percentages add up to nothing that makes sense because people were directed to select that all that apply. Top response was walking. And of note that riding the bus and using existing local transit, which we do have, and I'll talk a little bit about Senior Transportation Connection, a little bit down towards the bottom with 22% and 4%. About 35% of the respondents had 2 or fewer modes of travel that they indicated. About 70% was 3 or fewer modes, and the majority of the people answered, or well over the majority, 90% of the people that answered indicated 4 of those modes. So a lot of people selected most of them. Small percentage of people only indicated 1 mode, and those that did indicate 1 mode, 3/4 of them just said a car or carpooling, and I think that's probably no surprise to anybody. Only 3% said RTA transit was their only mode of travel. And so that starts to give you a picture that is probably not a big surprise to folks. But question 2 talks about how do you want to travel for trips in Lakewood? And so there was a ranking of 1 to 10 in terms of the preference. They all you get 550 people, everybody starts to shoot on that target, and it all averages out at some point, but 44% of people ranked riding the bus as one of their top 3. Driving a car was right about 50%. So there is, despite the low numbers of actual travel, there is some demand in Lakewood. I don't think that's a surprise. And then so question 3 asked what were the challenges of using public transportation, and the top 2, it should be no surprise to anybody, is that buses don't come frequently enough and buses don't go where I want to go. And that was, if anybody remembers the huge RTA study like 2 years ago, those were the 2 options that they worked with, is do you want reach or do you want frequency? And that's something that RTA as a regional system wrestles with every day. If you go to the next slide, please. This lists, and that's a laundry list but this was the most popular destinations that people listed in the survey. That obviously you ask people their question 4, where do you want to travel to? We got tons of different responses, and these were the most popular. So 451 out of 550 people said Lakewood Park. 359 out of 550 said the public library. And then you get into some of the grocery stores at Marks Plaza, Giant Eagle, and then a lot of the retail and some of the other park and entertainment venues and schools and things as you work your way down through here. And so this gives some kind of demand, a little bit of indication of public source demand, although it's self-selected public survey, but you start to see some of that piece. And then the last question there, the transit service preference, you can see
There's a question from President Couple.
Yeah.
Sorry, I would just be curious to compare this list to where RTA currently stops. Because sometimes, and also on the previous slide, it's hard to, based on your preferred means of travel, if the bus doesn't go where you want it to go, then it's